oppressed, even confused. It's enough now. We're taking the power back. We're stronger than before. We're proud and too strong. The worst is over. From Cape to Cairo, on Morocco to Madagascar. From Cape to Cairo, on Morocco to Madagascar.
Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us for yet another installation of the AZAPO online conversations. Today we're talking to young people about what Black consciousness means to them, what Biko means to them personally. And before we even get started on this, this is something that kind of cropped up for me in the course of preparing for today's conversation. And in light of the fact that it is, in fact, Steve Bantu Biko month in South Africa, or maybe the world over even, I thought maybe start this conversation with a reflection on something he said previously. And this particular quote triggered something in me. And it goes, Black consciousness is an attitude of mind and a way of life, the most positive call to emanate from the Black world in a long time. That was him then. Question I have for myself is, where is that voice? Is that voice alive? What do young people make of this voice? Where are young people in this space? Where are young people? Are they identifying with Black consciousness? And why Black consciousness? So to help us have this conversation, we have Sinovuyo Boltina. Sinovuyo will quickly introduce herself and then take us through her understanding of the topic at hand.
Thank you, Keke, and good afternoon to everyone watching from the various platforms and those that will be watching later. I think that I really can't help but reflect on your quote. And I think for me, I'd like to start by just taking a stance and saying that indeed that was something that Biko advocated for, but it is still something that for myself and how I view it, and obviously with my observation, hasn't been realized. And I think reflecting on our topic today, I want to also take a stance and say that his teachings and that of the Black consciousness movement, philosophy or ideology is still relevant, whether we want to admit it as young people or we don't. But I also want to say that I'm of the view that this is not something that is shared by all young people. Of course, having related with young people and being in the space where I'm surrounded by young people, we talk. And how I look at it, that there's this sense of way in which we can classify ourselves, where you find that amongst young people, there are those who identify themselves as Bikois, and there are those who don't at all, and those who partly will take or find some sense of inspiration in some of the things that he has said and the work that he has done and some of the ideas and concepts. And I think for me, just to elaborate on myself as well, I find myself being very much influenced by Biko's teachings and that of the Black consciousness movement. I think that for those, for example, who identify as Bikoist, it provides you with a sense of a lens or perspective of viewing things, yourself, other people, the issues that we face. But the reality of it, it's not something that is understood necessarily. And you can't help but ask yourself questions. Where did everything go wrong? For example, such powerful and profound ways of conceptualizing life, especially that of a Black person. Why are we not here? And I think that's one of the things that I wish to maybe look into, is also looking at what I spoke about in terms of how I think that as young people we are in different places, even in how we envision, society in the future and so on and so forth. So I think those are just my own personal reflections and something that I wish to maybe continue to discuss, and to grapple with and see where we can find some sense of a solution or way forward, I think. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sinovuyo. You say that you are attracted to the teachings of Biko. You say you are attracted to Black consciousness. What attracts you to Black consciousness in a world where we want a homogenized society of brown people? What brown people and peach people and yellow people, where we want to create a world where race is not an issue. What attracts you to Black consciousness?
I think what attracted me to Black
I think we might have lost her connection there. Let me see if we can get her back. Whilst we wait to get her back, I would like to maybe potentially, there she's coming back again. So while she's connecting, I would like to go back and maybe look at some of the things Steve Biko said about race. And in the world where we are told that identifying as a particular racial group means that you are being racist. And so I wonder if he himself, what his reflections would have been. But let me not take this a little too far. Sinovuyo's back. Sinovuyo, you were still saying.
I think that what has attracted me to his teachings and that of the Black consciousness movement is what they stand for. This idea of striving for one human race, where we reach a point of humanity where everyone is free from these injustices, like you have mentioned, racism, for example, where we live in a society where everyone is free from oppression, free from this idea that one race is better than the other, right? And I also think that another thing that attracts me to the philosophy itself is how, in a way, it encapsulates and it provides, like I said in my introduction, it provides you with this lens and perspective in which you can, in a way, conceptualize what is around you. I have not necessarily come across any other philosophy, I think, in my own personal experience or opinion, that is able to conceptualize, for example, the idea of being Black and who you are. What does that mean as a Black person? What should you strive? The idea of being a human, right? That you are supposed to be treated with integrity and pride. That Black life is something that needs to be reformed, where it inspires hope, it inspires confidence, and not what has been rendered or imposed on Black people, that we are nothing, we are worthless, we are supposed to be treated as being subhuman. And having grown into it, obviously it wasn't something that I just knew out of nowhere. It was something that I was influenced by being taught at home, which I think also provided me with how I became attracted over a period of time. It was easy to identify and see that, look at how Black life is where you are. Look at how it is and how it should be and what has been said about that. And so those are the ways that I find myself being very influenced and very much inspired as a young person, whereby, you find yourselves when we talk, it almost seems as though we're the type of people who are not necessarily inspired or have hope in a future, or are striving towards working to better society in a way whereby we can say that we have rid ourselves from oppression, in a way that is beneficial for everyone. So I think that it also shows how over time, the relevance of Biko's teachings and that of the Black consciousness movement can never ever be irrelevant or somehow not speak to the context in which we find ourselves, because there's these ideas and concepts such as reaching a point of humanity, where we no longer have racism. It isn't something that has been realized. And realizing that and being able to conceptualize that is something that I greatly attribute to his teachings, as well as that of the Black consciousness movement, philosophy, or ideology. And it is something that, I can't separate myself from. So yeah, I'd like to leave it at that.
Okay, so you talk about being unable to separate yourself from Black consciousness because it's how you're raised, it's how you're conscientized. I'm going to ask you a very simple question. It's very, very simple. How do you identify? Do you identify as Black? Do you identify as brown? Do you identify as female? How do you identify, and why is your identity important?
Identify as being Black. I think that I cannot exist as either a female or a young person without being Black. I think it starts there, because what Blackness embodies and what it speaks to, according to Biko's teachings and that of the Black consciousness, is how I see myself and how I wish that other people, can begin to see themselves. Because, the idea of race is something that has been used, or was used, and still continues to be used as a way to suppress and oppress, whether you're a woman or you simply identifying yourself as as a young person. The fact of the matter is, it all starts by you being Black. So that's how I then gradually looked at how it affects even my attitude of myself, and what Blackness represented before, and how it's important to change that narrative. So I think that's where I'd like to say that I locate myself.
Okay. So with that said, I want to explore this. So as a young person who is very much aware of the philosophy of Black consciousness and lives in a world of young people who are politically uninterested, how do you find yourself in this space? How do you get to this space? What inspires you to get to the space where other people are choosing, or other young people are choosing, to be politically agnostic?
What inspires is the reality of Black people. It hasn't changed. And that's something that will always be motivation, and something that I want to work towards. We haven't realized what Biko died for, what he advocated for, what the Black consciousness movement or philosophy stands for. And you're correct, I am surrounded by people who would always throw notions of, no, you live in this utopia, you're not being real with where we are, this will never happen. Or for example, even within school, I remember, I think in my high school, I always found myself in spaces which contradicted who I am and what I stood for. And it is difficult, particularly if it's something that you don't always have other people to somehow, think like you. Because I think what is also important to understand is that Ubiko is Ubiko as a result of a collaboration of ideas from other people as well, and belonging somewhere, and having a purpose of saying that, listen, this is what I am advocating for as an activist. This is why I travel. This is why I've implemented Black community programs. There's a goal and a quest, and that is that of humanity, to reach a point whereby the realities that we face, whether we would like to acknowledge them, be in denial of them, talk about it as something that will never be realized ever, it is currently there. So for as long as it is there, it is very important that I think for me, myself, as someone who again, I identified and I located myself and said that this is the stance in which I am taking. That is very important to me, being purpose driven, and saying that this is the purpose. And for as long as there is a purpose, I will continue to believe and to think the way that I think. So yeah.
Okay. Just for the benefit of everybody else who's watching us, thank you again for joining us. The people that are watching us on Facebook, as well as people that are, streaming live on YouTube, and people that are with us on this platform. We are awaiting an additional few panelists who may or may not be joining us this afternoon. They've had some technical difficulties. We're still trying to see if we can get them onto the conversation. But whilst we wait, I just thought that maybe let's reflect quickly with Sinovuyo and see how far we can take this conversation. Sinovuyo, just coming back to you, I actually want to ask you, in your view, what was the ideal that Biko was trying to create? If you were to paint a picture and say, from what I have seen, this is the picture that he was trying to create, and then take us from that picture and say, where are we now? And how do we get to where Biko wanted us to be, or where he envisioned that Black people would be today, or at some point?
I think that Biko was working towards reforming and changing the lives and the ideas of what it means to be a Black person and what it means to live as a Black person. I think that, you can't also just see Biko as just this figure, but also belonging in the Black consciousness movement and ideology or philosophy. So looking at the philosophy itself and what it stands for is this idea of reaching a one human race where humanity has been achieved, where, for example, we also grapple with the concepts of what it means to be Black, restoring dignity and pride and integrity in the meaning of being Black and identifying yourself as a Black person, where even the life you live embodies that. A life where we work together as Black people, we see each other as being human. And in all honesty, it is something that has not been realized. Otherwise, how do you then explain, Black on Black violence? How do you then explain how there are still people, living under conditions which honestly don't inspire any sense of hope or a life that shows that Black people indeed live a life that is dignified? The fact that we still have to talk about poverty, we still have to talk about, how Black people have been psychologically affected, So I think that we still have a long way to go. We truly and honestly speaking have a long way to go, and it is of no use, to say that, just because people know of Biko and him being this figure, that it's enough. I think that a lot still needs to be done, and sometimes it's a matter of, is it perhaps not understanding his teachings even in knowing them? Because I'm of the view that as young people, we are in a position of being privileged enough to see and to learn with all this information that has been provided to us. The fact that we have elderly people before us who have, in a way, grappled with these ideas before. They have also, interacted with Biko to an extent, and his ideas, I think, yet nothing is changing. Yet we are so, we aren't necessarily inspired enough to do anything. So it becomes a question of, perhaps, is it, maybe we have failed ourselves, or we simply just don't understand, even in knowing his ideas. It could be, a number of factors that come to play, and I think. So definitely that's where I stand, and that's how I view things.
There's been a conversation that says Black consciousness or Blackness is also a privilege afforded to a few. I'm going to give you a classical example, and I'm going to do this because I'm also looking at your hair. So there's been this debate going on about Black hair, and in particular, the Afro. And there was a big uproar when a child from a mixed race school, a private school, had issues with having to wear her Afro. But we know for a fact that Black schools in townships have a problem with the Afro. And this has never entered mainstream conversation because doesn't matter. Your Blackness is somehow linked to your ability to be able to articulate it and having a platform to be able to articulate your Blackness. Am I correct? Am I making things up? What is your take?
I think you're correct in saying that it hasn't really entered mainstream, and me myself, it isn't something that I've necessarily grappled with. So I think I'm just going to try and conceptualize this as best as I can. But it's interesting, really. It really is interesting. I think even when I was in high school, there was always debates around hair and what it means to Black students, and why is it that we are going to be told by white people in terms of how we're supposed to, wear our hair, and yet when you go to Black schools, like you say, it isn't necessarily a problem. So I think, again, it could be a question of what does it mean in Black schools or for Black people, predominantly Black schools? Why is the hair thing not something that is symbolic of or important in saying that, oh, this is your hair, it's okay? What are the debates around that? And I think it's something that I unfortunately, I have never really, understood or grappled with, but it has always been looking at neatness. Yet what's interesting is that when the same argument around neatness, for example, and I'm not saying that in all schools, in predominantly Black schools, they say it's a matter of neatness or it's problematic, or, but if the same argument is said in predominantly white schools, for example, or your liberal schools where there's Black people, for instance, it is problematized. So I think it is definitely something that we need to explore, because in all honesty, really, I also don't understand. I really don't understand what is the problem, or what is driving this narrative. And I'm looking at predominantly Black schools. Why does it seem like a privilege then, whereas there it's something else? So to be quite frank, I'm not quite sure. It would be very interesting to look into, because I think before you even mentioned it, it wasn't even something that I spent time even being aware of it, but it wasn't something that I've necessarily spent a lot of time grappling with. And I think it's quite interesting. Perhaps, it also speaks to, is it a matter of having attitude to the type of the hair, or is it really just a matter of neatness and preference, having rules in the school? It could be a number of things that I think need to be explored.
Seeing as that's not the subject of the day, I was just glossing at it because of your hair, but I want to go back to the concept of the unfinished vision. I want to go back to 1994, or prior to, just a little bit prior to 1994. Oh, I see Yonge is joining us. Yonge, hello. Please unmute yourself.
Hello.
Hi, Yonge, how are you?
I'm good, and yourself?
I'm fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure. I was just having problems with my gadgets. Even now, I can't unmute the video, so I'll have to go in blank.
No, this is good enough. Before I continue with the conversation I was having with Sinovuyo, I'm going to ask that you quickly introduce yourself and give us a short snippet of your views on the topic of the day, and then we can engage and just have this conversation together.
All right, no problem. Well, my name is Yonge Sijaji, and I'm from the Western Cape. On today's topic, I'm a bit thrown off with the troubles I've been having earlier on, but when I was approached and, for my availability, I was all fumbled up, not because I did not know what the topic meant to me or how to go on about it, but merely because there's so much that needs to be said, there's so much that needs to be highlighted. Going on what Tatu Bantu Biko actually means to me personally. For me, he just has made a difference, you know, a whole lot of difference when it comes to my mind and how to think. Firstly, you know, as I look today, so many young people my age and younger than me are, believe in black consciousness. But what I've realized is it is so haywired, it's so here and there, you know. They lack the education of what is black consciousness. You know, they lack information. It's all textbook read, it's all internet information, you know. There is no education that is a political education that is actually laid out there where people can go and learn and find out. Because I feel like Bantu Biko has left a legacy, you know, a legacy for the young people. And nowadays, with what we are faced with our schools, with where we work and day-to-day society, we are triggered by so many oppressing, how do I call them? Oppressing ideas, you know, and we live in other people's ideas. And I believe Bantu Steve Biko actually, you know, his idea was to liberate the minds of black people so they can be self-reliant. And I feel like as much as we're pushing for that self-reliance, day by day by day, we end up giving up and we give into what society is supposedly supposed to be, you know. So there's just so many things, you know, that I wanted to be on. I didn't know how was I going to actually have this discussion, because for me it is really deep. What does black consciousness mean to the youth? Do they actually know the meaning? Are they fully educated about it? Are they intrigued by it? Or are they just going with the fact that it's a trend, it's there? I don't know, there's a loose end somewhere. And I feel like we've got leaders that are still out there, black consciousness leaders that are actually still out there. And for me, they just need to reach out to the youth and give us a chance to actually understand what we fought for and what we need to still fight for, because there's a lot of fighting we need to do. So one of the things that I learned was courage and the ability to not allow control in your own life as a black person, as a black young woman. There's no other future besides the youth. And if the youth is not to be politically educated, then the youth is not there. It's just point blank, it's not there. There is no future. Because there's no point in having so many obstacles that we are faced with, racism, you know, and being intimidated and being undermined. And at the same time, we just bluntly and blindly go into the world and attack those issues. And no one is teaching us on how to actually solitude ourselves from that programmed world into recognition of the talents of the ideas that we have, and how the mind can actually, you know, fight the oppression, because we still live under oppression. You know what you need to do on a daily basis. You know what you're attacked with on a daily basis, and it's either you fight to free yourself, or you die trying. That's that's what we need to be taught, you know. So I think we still have a lot of, you know, issues to attack, and it starts with acceptance, accepting yourself, accepting the situation. That's the only way we can figure out where to go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Yonge. I'm keen to then reflect on the following. What does Black consciousness mean to you? What does living Black mean to you in the world where white proximity means success? What does living Black mean for you? What does waking up in the identity of knowing that I'm Black mean to you every day when you wake up? What does it say to you when you wake up and you know that you're Black?
For me, waking up Black means I'm beautiful. Waking up in a life of white proximity means I've got power. Nothing fears the white minority with the idea of a Black person being in power. For me, I wake up every day with the thought. Every day, I literally wake up and look at myself and wonder, what would have been different if I was white? Where would I be now? Would I be one of the capitalists? Would I be the privileged white young woman who has everything handed over to her? But for me, it comes back again and says, I am Black and I'm proud. For me, Black consciousness means I know who I am. I know where I come from. I know where my forefathers come from. I know where I am going. Okay. Now, remember, you can never.
Yonge, you are muted. Yonge, yes.
It means self-worth. It means confidence, self-identity, and knowing your worth and knowing where you're going. It means beauty. For me, it means tradition, you know, because when you're a Black person, there's so many things that are artificial out there that you can actually recreate for yourself, you know, grow for yourself. Whereas you have your white minority in South Africa or Africa in that matter, who cannot do those things for themselves, but use the ideas of a Black person in exchange of oppressing it, because they know the worth, they know of the power behind it. So for me, Black consciousness just means I am me, I will always be me, and I am in control.
Sinovuyo, you keep nodding, and I'd like to hear yours if it's a shared sentiment, and why you agree with Yonge.
I think I've agreed with her, you know, from the point that she made on how it's just simply not enough to know his ideas to an extent, especially as young people, and also the need to still continue to, in a way, focus on conscientizing ourselves, you know, looking beyond just the words, understanding them, you know, grappling with the ideas on a continuous basis. Because I'm of the view that I don't want to say completely that people lack the information necessarily, but you know, just quoting him here and there is not enough, because Biko advocated a way of living, a way of life. You know, he was advocating a way of seeing things how they are right now and also the future, you know, of imagining how we should, you know, get to a particular pace. He was a man who had purpose. He belonged. I understood that we need to work together, advocated for solidarity, advocated for self-reliance, taking action, taking control of our lives and our own narrative. And that is not something that you just get from just quoting him here and there. And I also don't want to be misunderstood. There is nothing wrong with being inspired by him. I don't think that it's a matter of saying that those who identify themselves as Biko West are somehow jealous of other people having the ideas. In fact, he wanted all Black people to embody this, to live this, to have this mentality and attitude of ourselves and other people and relate to other Black people, you know, and their lives and ways of seeing ourselves as at the forefront and being very important. But he also took action, you know, and he understood that it had to, you know, occur only once we come together and we do this. And we don't necessarily, you know, do it for the sake of what Yonge also highlighted of the aesthetics, the idea of seeming woke. You know, I wear my afro, I'm proud, but what does that mean? You know, there's some people who also limit it to just your afro, and it's like, no, you can't embody certain ideas and then take some, you know. I think that's sometimes how I seem to problematize, you know, people's stances, and I see it as being problematic, how you can talk about how you may love certain aspects that he speaks to and disregard them. On what grounds? When he located himself, when he said, this is where I stand, when he went and joined ISASO Okanye, or rather the Black People's Convention, he had a vision. He located himself and he said, this is where I am, and understood that, you know, and also something also that I think is important to highlight, he was considered an organizational genius. He understood that you had to belong, you had to be an organization. You can't do this by yourself. So to also seem as if I'm just going to quote and take it here and I want to do things by myself, I want to seem like this hero, is also something I seem to find problematic, but yet prevalent amongst us young people, particularly when you find young people carrying his book or what has been written about him, you know, quoting here and there, yet when they relate to other Black people, they don't seem to embody what they are quoting or what they see. So I think that, again, I really can't help but agree with what Yonge was highlighting. And I think it's just something that needs to be emphasized, that he is more than just a figure that you can place him wherever you want. You cannot do that. You have to understand him in his entirety. And when you take ideas and see relevance and inspiration from that of the Black consciousness movement philosophy, you have to live that in its entirety as it exists and how it and what it advocates for. You can't take bits and pieces here and there. And I strongly agreed with what Yonge was saying, and it is indeed a problem that you find amongst young people.
Okay. I hear you. Now, Yonge and Sinovuyo, allow me to be the devil's advocate. So Yonge says to us, we look to the generation before us to lead us, to teach us, to show us how to do this thing, to tell us what the ideal was and how it got messed up and what needs to be done to be able to move to the next level. Yonge wants to paint a picture. I'll tell a story of the woman who's you're talking to, Kekeletso, today. Kekeletso is the first generation Model C child. And she then goes to a school where even though she's an A+ student, she gets treated as a DE child. Lapayana, you know, she gets ignored. And she's told to stay quiet, to stay in the corner, to not show up, to not be invited to the prize giving. And so she is taught at that level that in her Blackness, it doesn't matter what her intellectual capability is, who she is as a person does not matter. And she is then raised to aspire to whiteness, because being white means that you can be seen. It means that you can be heard. It means that you can show up. It means that you are human. And so starts the journey of one wanting to sound like them, to dress like them, dance like them, wear their clothes, eat their food, imbibe their culture in the best way possible, because that means I am going to be seen. You, Yonge, are asking me, the wounded Black, to show you what it is to be Black and proud. Is it possible? Are we the people that you need to be looking to, considering the woundedness that we carry because of our history?
As a person who would ask you, you know, to do such, I'm not really sure if it's possible, very possible. You as a Black child, yes, you were taught to, you know, disregard yourself because it did not matter as a person because you are Black. But it is possible because you are able, if your mind can be isolated from the teachings of your oppressors, because they are your oppressors. They are teaching you to be them, you know, clothing you their clothes and feeding you their food and teaching you what they think is relevant for your future according to their standards. It is very important to reach out. Because if you feel like as a Black person and you feel like you're obliged to do such things, there is nothing wrong in seeking relevance within your own. I'm a person who believes that every person has control to their thoughts, right? Remember, all of these things are happening to you when you're out there. There is time when you are alone. I think that's the time where you actually become or try to become yourself. When there is so many out there that are actually, you know, living that life. Now we've got leaders, you know, who have been left with the legacy of Black consciousness, you know. And as much as he was a popular voice of Black liberation, in particular the youth, right? The Black youth were highly receptive of the prospect of BCM. Although Biko was not the only leader of BCM, but he was the most recognizable and most relevant because he stood out. He was, in Afrikaans, we would say he was very asperous, you know. He was out there. He was provocative because he felt that I am me and I cannot be told by you who to be. So when you paint that picture for me, when he says I cannot be told who I should be by you, this picture you're painting me says I will be what you say you want me to be, all right? That then becomes very tricky because now as this young person, you grew in that environment. You can no longer take yourself out of it unless you are given a crutch to. And that is why I say we like education, because we do not have a crutch to lean on. Yes, the crutch is actually there.
but is it visible enough? Or do I have to look for it? Now, the picture that you painted for me, that person is not going to look for that crutch because it's not visible. It's not there. You know, whereas in prior to 94, with our forefathers, our fathers and mothers, and they were out there. You know, day to day, it was a cry every day. But now that cry is in certain places, it's spread out. You know, I have to find that cry. I have to find the help. I need to find the education. I need to find the people who are going to help me re-identify myself, because I grew up in a society that has actually programmed me to be this person I am today. I am a snob. I dress like the white. I eat the white. I want nothing to do with pap. I want nothing to do with mohod. Right? But now, if I'm isolated for them, where is that person who eats umhodu, who can tell me this tribe actually, it is nothing wrong with it. It's food. It's the food that we eat, the food that was eaten by my ancestors. Now, where is the person who's going to say to me, it's okay to speak Xhosa, it's okay to speak Sesotho. I'm not just a Xhosa by being born into a closer tribe or anything like that. I am Xhosa. I speak Xhosa. I understand who I am. So it goes back to saying our leaders now who are still here were left a legacy. And as much as I know they haven't shut their mouths about it, but what more can they do to reach out to those who cannot actually, you know, identify themselves, because now they're already oppressed because of the school they went to, because of the friends that they grew around, the teachings. How do they unlearn those things? You know, again, it goes to the political education. What is Black consciousness? Because so many youngsters know about Black consciousness, but still live as the white minority. I don't know if
Sinovuyo, your reflection on the same question.
I think that yes, it is very easy to be discouraged, and this picture that you're painting of constantly being suppressed, constantly being told you're worthless, yet you believe in this ideal, but it seems so far-fetched, it just seems so difficult to reach. But that's where the purpose is located. Because if we were all living a wonderful life and there was no pain, and what the Black consciousness movement spoke to and was advocating for has been realized, then the need and the relevance and the continuous will that we need to have to continue to strive for what we have seen to not have been realized will forever remain. And I think that what Yonge has essentially touched on is something that I also can't help but reflect on, and that is the issue of visibility. If, for example, we are people who say that this is what we stand for, this is what needs to be done, we need to be visible. And I think this is, I guess, relating to on an organizational basis, because I think for me, as I've emphasized before, there's no way you can do it without other people. You cannot just go by yourself and think you're going to achieve anything. And Biko was an illustration of that. He essentially, his life illuminates that and shows you exactly that. So I think for me, you know, in terms of looking at an organization such as AZAPO, my reflections would be members need to come out from the dark, I think. It has always been something that I had a problem with of, I'm a young person, I want to do something, but what am I doing? Like, what must I do? What can happen, right? And I think that maybe it's true to go back how things were done. because I am of the view that AZAPO did participate, for example, in community programs, was at some extent visible, but where is that now? And I'm saying this whereby I speak to people, friends who have never even heard of AZAPO, for example. And we say that these are the issues that are facing Black people, but are we, there amongst other Black people? Are we amongst them? Are we speaking to them? It could even be an issue of, are we using a language that resonates with them, or are we just having these discussions with ourselves? Is that ever going to be enough? And I think there are various things that we need to explore and have been explored before. Perhaps it's a matter of going back to them. That's just up for a discussion or debate. And that looks at, for example, like I mentioned, the issue of community programs. If it's a matter of saying, okay, there's no money, then hop onto existing community programs or associations within the community. If we're saying that we want to change the lives of abantu abamnyama or Black people in rural areas, join forums that exist in rural areas, meetings, discussions that speak to different things. Doesn't even have to be specific to our political agenda necessarily. But how can you influence something when you're at home? How can you, for example, disagree on something when you're at home? How can you spark change or influence if we are not there? So I think it speaks to, not being shy as members. It speaks to visibility, having a purpose, putting ourselves out there, trying as much as possible, even as young people, and I hold myself accountable as well. I'm not going to come here and also paint a picture of saying that, oh, I've got this together, definitely, I think that there's still a long way. But if we want to reach, for example, I think Yonge was alluding to this, the whole idea of political education, then you need to be in spaces where there are young people. You need to speak a language that resonates with young people. But constantly grappling with this and going in circles or in a way, and also blaming elderly people to an extent won't help, because older people are not energized as ourselves. And what can they possibly do other than to equip us and to teach us and to tell us, read this, this is what it means, this is what it stands, but the rest is up to you. And going back to Biko, and I think it's always important to just reflect on him, he was a man of action. He traveled to different places, meeting people, collaborating with people, and understood that you have to take, charge of your own narrative, of your own life, of whatever it is that you wish to change. You need to be at the center of it all. You need to have a purpose. But most importantly, surround yourself with people who think alike as well. But in this instance, it talks about being visible, and I think for as long as we don't emphasize that, because I am sure I'm not speaking something that has not been said before. I'm sure through resolutions that have been passed, and, through conferences AZAPO has held, it has been at the forefront, but it always becomes a question of, where is it? If it means wearing your T-shirt proudly, when you take part in some community program, for instance, do that. If there are sports associations that exist in communities, join that, right? But I think what has to be emphasized is that, to be quite honest, no matter where we can look in terms of context, issues remain, and that is the life of Black people still needs to be reformed. The attitude and the mind of Black people still needs to be reformed. The ideas of how we see ourselves as Black people and consciousness as a whole is something that still needs to be grappled and something that still needs to be realized. And one can never overemphasize that until it actually is understood and to an extent embodied. So I definitely think that it's very important that whenever we look at Biko and his teachings, we don't just look at words, but we look at his
I think we have lost Sinovuyo there. I'm hoping she'll come back again. So that we continue. Yonge, I want to ask you this question. when you started talking, you spoke about Ubiko and self-reliance. You spoke about freeing the mind. You spoke about Ubiko being about not just Black consciousness, but really at the center of know thyself. So I want to ask this question. What does freedom look like for you? What does freedom look like for you today? What is this thing that we still need to do?
Well, again, the only thing we need to do is, again, gather ourselves, gather the youth, and reliance. So what do I mean about self-putting things for themselves, because one of the things that are frustrating the young people is jobs and education. Those things, with people who are living in rural areas, people who are struggling, they have no access to employment. They have no access to education. There are certain things that need to be done in order to get those things, and the affordability, now they're not free, because if we're going to say now we are a free country, we live in democracy, then what does that mean for them? Because they are unable to reach those things, and you need to have certain criteria in order for you to qualify for those things. It's the qualifying that is, leaving us underprivileged. And so for me, it's not what do we need to do, is how do we do it? Because we do know what we need to do. We do know that we need to start creating our own Black businesses. We do know we need to empower ourselves, in starting those businesses, and actually, supporting the kids that still need to go to school, and supporting each other to create more employment, our agriculture, growing our own crops to feed the people who have no food, But how do we start helping each other in the Black communities if we cannot start the process? Because we cannot start the process if you don't know how to. I may have a nice big yard at home, but do I know anything about growing a food garden? Where does it start? Do I need to Google it in order to start it so that I can fail? And I can't afford to fail, because where do I get the seeds again? So for me, it's Black empowerment. The education needs to, we need to have those training workshops. We need to have, talks and discussions as the youth, almost all the time of our lives, because we do have time on our hands. We need to have those discussions. How do we attack those things, the needy? Because at the end of the day, we are not free. We need to create our own freedom. Until we learn that we need to grab it, it's not going to be there. Just because I can take 10 Rand and go buy bread, which is no longer 10 Rand, it's 15 Rand, that doesn't mean I'm free. I still have to work under someone, make them 10 times the amount that they pay me in order to afford what I'm supporting. The white capitalists. When am I supporting Black-owned businesses? There's only a minority of them, and there's only so much I can do. Even those businesses, some of them, they're actually, sponsored by the capitalists, and being sponsored by them, they're still gaining something by doing so.
So for me, it's like you become now a front for those businesses. So again, there need to be sites, there needs to be visibility for the youth in order for them to actually, start recognizing themselves, the talents, the skills that they could have, the skills that they already have, the talents that they already have, the education that is there. Again, in order to feel free is for you to free your mind.
Okay.
To learn, yes.
Now continue, you were saying? To learn?
To learn that I do not have to be under someone in order to have success.
Thanks, Yonge. Sinovuyo, I'm going to ask you a question. So here's what I'm thinking. I hear you, Yonge, when you are saying that there needs to be workshops, there needs to be all of these things, you need to be taught, people must make time for you and teach you all of these things. Steve Biko says that there needs to be a renewal of the mind. And as a person, I've come to realize that it doesn't matter how much money we are going to throw at our people. It doesn't matter how much workshopping we're going to throw at our people. It doesn't matter how many businesses we are going to open. Until we heal the mind of the Black child, we are not ever going to realize any of these freedoms that we so wish. But this is my perspective. Sinovuyo, what is your take on this conversation?
I think that's 100% where I stand as well. And I think even the last time when we had conversations regarding the challenges young people face and how we can go about solving these problems. And I remember saying that at the end of the day, if you don't have a particular attitude or a mindset that one realizes that, okay, we need to be self-reliant, or if, for example, these businesses that we are talking about implementing or having in communities, that I need to support it, rather than equating myself with whiteness and striving for whatever a white person has. And also, even when we look at our solutions, we find that the white people remain the standard and we are constantly chasing after them. Then indeed, it speaks to what you are saying, and that our minds are still, need to be free from mental servitude, and what Biko speaks about, that our attitude not only towards ourselves but each other is something that we still need to work on. Otherwise, how do you explain people who will say that, no, I can't support Black businesses, they're too expensive, or I don't understand what this is? No, you know what I mean? These attitudes that we have of other people that we are that are actually just like us, and that is that they are Black. So I think at the end of the day, again, I honestly can't take away from what you said, because I really believe that what you have said encapsulates exactly what I think it all starts with: consciousness. And I think we can only reach that if those who also believe in this go out there and advocate for it, and speak to it and encourage people to one, realize who they are, realize who someone just like them is, irrespective of where they are. Because the fact of the matter is, I also believe that we are under this idea that, if I'm in a white school, it's not a problem, I'm in a different place, we're not affected under the same issues. And to agree, you can say that. But the fact of the matter is, looking at how systematically we are being oppressed, so you can strive for greatness and whiteness all you want, you will never be white. You will never necessarily reach that point, because how it was structured and this white supremacist structure and hierarchy that exists was mainly for that, which is everyone will forever remain subordinate and will forever remain oppressed on the basis that they are Black. You will never reach that point. It was intentional. It was planned. That's what they wanted. So I think it's very important, like you have said, and I really don't want to take away from that. But I think, again, what you have been saying and how you have conceptualized it is something that needs to be emphasized over and over and over again. That you can run as much as you want, you can strive for whiteness all that you want, but for as long as you have not liberated your mind and what Biko stood for, and that of the Black Consciousness movement philosophy, you will never, ever free yourself from oppression. you will never be self-reliant, because how do you get to that point if you don't have that vision? How do you get that point of being self-reliant as a group of people if you are still thinking from the lens of white people or individualism, for example? One where you don't recognize and see yourself and other Black people as being human and also worthy. For example, if you're a black person, you're occupying certain privileges, why is it that you don't want other people to experience that are Black as well? And that speaks to the notion again of where we are in terms of our attitude and our psyche, and how it as much as we talk about it, somewhere, somehow, that small amount that is in our curriculum, it isn't emphasized enough. And as young people, myself, Yonge, and other people who identify and understand this, it really becomes our duty that it's something that we emphasize and something that we speak to, and we always overemphasize, even to say that this is what we need to understand and see as being important. And I think there's no other way of even encapsulating what Biko stood for and advocated for than that in itself, that we need to work towards liberating the minds of Black people, realizing our self-worth, realizing that we are worthy just by being Black and not because we've reached a certain level of whiteness. That alone, I think really is very important. And I couldn't have agreed more.
Thank you so much. So Unantobeka Yawas just sent us a chat to say, we learned about BC through workshops and training programs set up in BCM. We really need to re-establish these in our communities to reach young people. Not sure why past leaders of the Black Consciousness movement find this difficult or a challenge to establish these training workshops in communities. I think they're just responding to the fact that there needs to be better outreach. We're not doing well as an organization. The older generation, says, the older generation of leaders must give space to young people who subscribe to the Black consciousness to take over the baton and lead. The energy is there. It just needs to be nurtured and given space to grow and lead us to the promised land. Like you said, Yonge, that you guys have the energy to be able to move this forward. You just need to be guided in terms of how that needs what that needs to look like. And I think it's a conversation that needs to happen. Nkokeng says, indeed, Comrade Mokhotsi, it's a breath of fresh air. It's very encouraging to hear these ideas coming out from young people. We have talked to ourselves for far too long. It's now time to evaluate ourselves against community engagement projects. And this is very true. I mean, people are saying that AZAPO is an organization of intelligentsia of sorts, the learned kinds that are very, very exclusive, and they don't speak to anybody. They only speak amongst ourselves. And I'm here, and I see that, the young people that I'm talking to are people who are very conscious, who are Black conscious, who understand the issues themselves very, very well. They're very articulate about them. However, clearly we are not getting to the people who need to have this knowledge. And I think we do have an opportunity to do better there. I want to ask another question. Is freedom truly possible if we do not control the economy or the land? And what is it going to take for us to attain economic and land freedom with your leadership as young people?
Okay, freedom is not possible if we cannot take the economy over, because once the economy belongs to them, it means everything that generates is theirs, the whites, that hence we need to start with us in liberating the minds. And actually, again, like Sinovuyo said, you cannot run away from knowing that you are Black. Now, once we are able to, get the youth to understand that you are Black and you're not going to be white at any point, as much as you can be a privileged Black person who can maybe have it all, you're still Black. You belong to a Black person. And because you're privileged, you are one of the people that need to liberate themselves and actually create opportunities for your fellow Black people, all right? Hence, if we could, be visible again,
have people like me and Sinovuyo who already understand the meaning of wanting that liberation as a Black person, then we can, start having these talks, these discussions, having these t-shirts, having these flyers, having these posts, whatever it takes to get out there and be visible. Because obviously it's not going to happen in 2 years, 10 years, 15 years. But in order for the next generation from us to actually have control over the economy, we need to, to have the freedom, we need to take over the economy. And it starts by supporting each other. And it starts by liberating our minds and understanding that supporting a Black person does not mean their product is not quality. Because I feel like we've got that thing of if let's say for an example, I'm printing out, t-shirts or whatever, I'm starting my own brand. I sell this t-shirt for what, 300 Rand? Compared to something that is bought from a diesel t-shirt from Eggers that is 500 Rand. You get a person who's actually, intrigued to go buy because it's diesel and not buy mine because I did it from my home. I did it from at home, not in a factory, or out there somewhere in the world where I don't even know where the factory is. It's almost as if it lacks originality when it's the most original. I don't know if you understand,
No, I completely get you. I completely get you.
That thing where I don't want to buy it because it was done in a corner somewhere. So we need to start understanding what quality is, Okay.
Now I hear you. I just would like to invite.
So we need to start respecting each other, respecting. Sorry.
No, you can continue, Yonge. I thought you were done. You can continue. You got cut off.
Okay. So it starts by grouping. It starts by, collecting ourselves. It starts by reaching out. The freedom that we want can only be created by us. And again, the economy and, the business world and everything, we can never be liberated enough to get control if we don't start with ourselves. I think that's the reality of it. It's not something you can just take over and move on from it. Because again, they have the economy, but how have they got the economy through us, by using what we have, by using our minds, by oppressing them, because they knew if we had to have control of this economy, there's so much. Remember when they came to colonize, that they saw land, they saw beauty in the land. Who made that land beautiful? They could have never, I can't imagine them actually having beautiful land as we did. We've got dry grass out there. We've got, we've got mountains, the trees, the forests that are on the mountains are actually dying. They can't look after it. Whereas that was our nature, and it was bright and green because that's all that we knew. We knew that that gave us life. And in order for us to give us some more life, we had to take care of it. But now it's being, there's so much pollution, it's dying. See how they cannot take care of it. They're just busy with being artificial.
I hear you. Thank you so much, Yonge. Thank you so much. We have Unantobeka has come back again to say that we are fortunate to have people who have been educated and trained, who need to give back to Black communities. It needs the sacrifice of time and knowledge. And I couldn't agree with you more, Unantobeka, that there needs to be a sacrifice. We need to be conscious about giving of our time to drive the agenda of Black consciousness, because without it, we can never really realize true freedom. We can never really talk about the emancipation of our people when in actual fact their minds are still shackled in the need for proximity to whiteness. It's very, very problematic. And so anybody else who is on the platform who wants to share in this conversation, to be part of this conversation, you can just raise your hand or send us a chat and we'll be able to bring you on and just have a conversation. If you have any questions for the panelists, we'd like to hear from you. Unontabeka also says, you need to start somewhere and establish programs for future generations. The struggle is protracted. The process towards freedom is ongoing, slow and painful, with obstacles as we're experiencing. We need to be aware of these and jump over them or go around them. Onelvis says, great and informative discussion. Young Black gifted activists like you have to realize that they first need to run backwards to snatch the baton from the old guard. That's the only way, because legacy will be kept, developed, and mainstreamed and advanced. So you now need to go back to the leadership, run backwards first, and go and grab the baton so that you can run. And I couldn't agree with you more. And Yonge, I think this kind of actually adds to what you were saying about, young people needing the guidance. Sinovuyo, I'm going to give you an opportunity to just reflect on this, going backwards to snatch the baton, and what that might look like for you and other young people.
I think it's definitely correct, because again, these ideas that now we are discussing and talking about have been said before, but it can easily be lost when there's no proper understanding. And I think there's only one way we can get that, and that is sitting down with people who gave their lives specifically into being advocates, being in spaces where they fought for this, grappling with the concepts that are advocated for in the ideas of the Black consciousness movement and that of Biko's teachings. And I think it's also, what important to understand that they can't do anything else, in terms of being at the ground, for example. It is our responsibility as young people, but at the same time, we can't just go and do whatever we want. Even when I was talking about these community programs and so forth, are things that, for example, the AZAPO has at some point, done. So look into how that can be brought back again, and how can you do that other than by going back to the elders in the organization, getting some sense of direction of how can we establish or either work with what exists, how can we look at the political context, and also, regarding the question that looked at the land, I also found it to, something that I can also reflect or found myself reflecting on, is that also on a political context, we also need to understand that we need to be in a position whereby you can instill change, or you can bring about change. And in this instance, you need to be visible. You need to be out there so that people, one, can support you, but also that you can influence. For example, if you're going to be in the parliament to bring this notion and agenda, you need to be there, unfortunately. So I think, again, it's just working on getting more and more support from people, more and more people to join and to also be activists, more and more people to understand the ideas and the purpose of it all. Because at the end of the day, there is a purpose. And I think that purpose is, as young people, even myself included, has to be cultivated still and assisted and guided in a way. And what better way to do this other than going to the elder people who are still here, because we're very fortunate. We have people who were there during the 70s who know what happened and how we can go about, conceptualizing things, and how we can be people that are that actually, that are purpose driven, but also take action. So I think it's also very important, and I can't really, stress it enough. And I think it has been stressed, but it needs to be emphasized more. I agree. But at the same time, we also, as young people, can't make it seem as if we know everything. We really do not. So I definitely agree with what Udarinals has said, that it's really important that we look at elderly people and they avail themselves and they say that here, we are willing to teach you, to mentor you, to show you, or to educate you, for example, because we can have all these ideas, but sometimes you need to be able to have them cultivated in a way that, one, you can also speak to people. For example, when we reach out in communities, we speak in a way that they understand and who can teach you that other people that have done it before. So it's very important, and I definitely agree.
Thank you so much for that. I wanted to quickly reflect on Black mediocrity. You are a generation of social media and the ability to make mediocrity fly. How then do we balance off the mediocrity and the howling that you too know about? And you know how people have sort of grabbed the feeling on the ground in terms of the needs of Black people to be heard, to be seen, and they have turned it into a howling competition, and it's mediocre in how it is presented, it's mediocre in how it is activated, but it has captured the nation. But this Black mediocrity is growing. How then do you think we can create balance? How can AZAPO then create the balance in terms of creating a true voice of Black consciousness, and to actualize the voices and the aspirations of Black people? I'm going to start with you, Yonge, and let's try and be very, very short and punchy on this one.
It's it's very funny you asked this question just as I was thinking about it, you know, because you could say the youth has control over the media. it's their world, it's the way they live, you know, on also social platforms. I feel like this can be used in so many ways, because it is one of the, you know, the limited ways you can reach the youth. Nowadays, when you mention a workshop, for example, they get bored. I don't want to go there. I'm going to sit there for hours, you know, and all it's talk. But when it comes to social media, nothing is as intriguing as, you know, creating, you know, a bit of fun in it, you know, because when you make something, remember, you need to cater for people that, you know, your audience, you know, they're young. So whatever you do, no matter how serious it could be, no matter how, you know, what can I say? I think I lost the word I had it. But no matter how serious it can be, you need to add a little extra fun with challenges. Nothing excites the youth as a challenge, especially when it's in the media. Once you're able to challenge the youth, you are able to you know, get them and draw them, because they always want to do better. They always want to be relevant, you know. But that's all I have to say.
Okay, Sinovuyo, what are your thoughts on mediocrity, Black mediocrity? You know, we must support all things Black, even when they are mediocre, because, you know, it's a social media and you cannot be seen to be going against Black things, even though they are mediocre. What's your take on that?
I think it's interesting, but and there are quite a number of things that always come to mind. But the first one is, I think that as young people, we lack accountability. I think that we don't account to one another enough to say that I'm calling you out. This is not right. This approach and what you're saying and these sentiments that you are spreading are not correct, even if it's unpopular. But I think that we have in a way removed ourselves from that notion and understanding and ways of doing things, in that you are free to say whatever you want, even if you're pushing a horrible narrative in the name of it's a safe space, say whatever you want. you know, no one is held accountable for anything. And that does, you know, increase what I think you are referring to as we are very superficial. We end up being very superficial because no one is saying, no, I challenge this. And I guess this is where Uyonge's view comes in, that we are not challenged. It's okay to accept anything because there's not this culture of accountability, of saying that I account for you, you account for me. I will call you out, in a way of trying to make everyone better, in also growing our thinking as people, and ways of conceptualizing matters and our opinions and views, to the point that they are not average. They are not just things that are very superficial and don't carry weight or spark, you know, a sense of change and taking action and speaking to things and looking at its complexities, other than just, you know, throwing in whatever you want in the name of I can hide behind my phone. It's social media. I can do whatever I want. So I definitely think for me that I would probably boil down to accountability, that there lacks this culture of accounting for what we say and what we put out there. That it's okay. And if you say something, I feel like you are seen as this hater, this person who is very negative, you know, on the other side of the spectrum, speaking to what they are problematizing at that point, rather than challenging and saying, but I'm not convinced in what you are saying, you know, and having these conversations. I think having that culture would change what I think has become a group of young people that look at things on a superficial level.
I couldn't agree with you more. Yonge, just an opportunity. Also, before we go to you, Nontobeko Yawa says accountability was managed in traditional structures, destroyed by Western systems, which cause alienation amongst us, which is true. We've given up so many of our systems that have created accountability, that allowed us to know that we're part of a collective, and you know, this notion of individualism, it's so big now that I don't even know where to begin to start reminding Black people that you are part of the collective, and as a unit, you are powerless and you are so easily cut down. But that's conversation for another day. Yonge, your final closing remarks in a minute or so. Sinovuyo immediately afterwards in a minute or so. Let's start with you, Yonge.
In closing, I would like to say, you know, I feel like I hope the elders have heard us and have understood that we are crying for their hand out. You know, we need a crutch to lean on. We need to learn. We want to learn more because we want to reach to our fellow, you know, youngsters also, and make that difference, because I do want Black people to be in control. I want them to be liberated. Also, thank you for this, you know, chance to be on this platform, and I hope this discussion will go to many people and they will understand that we just need to take a stand. And this is a fight that is not yet to be over. So we need to strive for that end. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Sinovuyo?
I think that my last remarks would essentially entail that I believe that we need to take inspiration from Biko and what he stood for, and that of the Black Consciousness movement. I think that it's time that we take action. It is time that we are not shy about where we stand in our ideas and views, and how we see life and the future. So I couldn't agree with Yonge saying that we're looking at the older members of this organization to assist us, that we may never lose hope, irrespective of what is happening outside. Even if we're discouraged, may we continue to look at what Biko died for and still see that there is still relevance and meaning in his teachings and that of the Black Consciousness movement, and that we should continue to strive for his ideas of what humanity entails. And for as long as that has not been achieved, we have an obligation to try, whatever that means. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sinovuyo. In closing, I'm also going to read a quote by Stephen Biko where he says, "I'm going to be me as I am, and you can beat me or jail me or even kill me, but I'm not going to be what you want me to be." And with this quote, I am inviting you to be part of next week's program, where Seth Cooper will be talking to us about Blackness on Trial, a catalyst for the Azanian Revolution. It's going to be epic. It is absolutely going to be epic. I look forward to being a part of the program and learning and listening. I thank you so much for having made the time to spend with us and to engage in the conversation. Sinovuyo, Yonge, I am comforted by the knowledge that there's young people like you out there, and that the future of Black consciousness is alive. The future of Black consciousness is real. The future of our people has potential, because the reality is that we all understand that we can never truly realize freedom until our people know who they are. And Black consciousness is that movement that speaks to the heart and the soul and the mere existence, the very existence of Black people. It is so critical for the existence of our people, for the freedom of our people, for them to know who they are. Black consciousness is the key. Without it, no amount of money, no amount of space, no amount of anything is going to free our country. We need to know who we are against the world. Lesego, I see you. Lesego Mogotsi says, AZAPO can be practiced, can be practical by taking a resolution that at least 60% of the candidates in 2024 will be youth and women. Galaxy says, I'm not sure what your name is, but very, very fruitful session. I thank you so much for having made the time. I'm really, really grateful. Have yourself a fantastic afternoon further. Have a good day. We love you all. Amandla.
Ooh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Listen, the struggle was not red. I experienced it, being deprived, being oppressed, even confused. It's enough now, we're taking the power back. We're stronger than before, we're prouder, too strong. The worst is over. From Cape to Cairo, Morocco to Madagascar.